The small box containing 15 years of memories sat on Rachel Foster's desk. She placed the last picture frame inside, a photo of her shaking hands with delegates from 40 different species. Back then, she believed cooperation could change everything. Back then, the Galactic Council seemed like humanity's greatest achievement. Rachel sealed the box with tape and marked it with a simple label: Earth. Tomorrow, she would board the final transport home. Tonight, she walked through Unity Station one last time, watching the lights of 1,000 worlds shimmer through the transparent dome above. The council chamber door stood open as always, welcoming anyone who wished to observe the proceedings. Rachel stepped inside, though no session was scheduled. The massive circular room felt empty without the usual crowds. Seats rose in tiers around a central platform, each position marked with symbols of the species it represented. The human seat, third from the left in the outer ring, already had its emblem covered. They had wasted no time, erasing the evidence of humanity's presence. Rachel remembered her first day here, how excited she felt representing Earth among the stars. The Chitauri delegate, Counselor Bren, had barely acknowledged her greeting. The Delphi High Administrator, Lysara, spent their first meeting explaining how young species needed to learn patience. The crystalline Lumi's observers recorded everything but said little. The other species treated humans like children who would eventually understand how things really worked. 15 years of proposals rejected. 15 years of warnings ignored. 15 years of being patted on the head and told to wait their turn. The final insult came 3 months ago. Rachel had presented a comprehensive plan for emergency response teams, groups that could deploy quickly to natural disasters across the galaxy. She brought data showing how many lives could be saved, how much suffering could be prevented. The cost was minimal, the benefit enormous. Counselor Bren called it wasteful. Administrator Lysara questioned whether such intervention was appropriate. The vote failed before Rachel finished her presentation. That night, Rachel sent a message to Earth. She recommended withdrawal from the Council. 6 weeks later, Earth's government agreed. The formal announcement happened in this very chamber. Rachel kept her statement brief and professional. She thanked the Council for the opportunity to participate. She expressed hope that future relations would be productive. She did not mention the dismissiveness, the condescension, or the frustration. Humans knew how to leave with dignity. The silence that followed her announcement was absolute. Counselor Bren recovered first, standing to acknowledge Earth's decision with what might have been relief in his compound eyes. Administrator Lysara asked if Earth would reconsider, but her tone suggested she was following protocol rather than expressing genuine concern. The Lumi's observers simply recorded as they always did. Within a week, humans began packing. Embassies closed. Trade offices forwarded contacts to private companies. Cultural centers donated their contents to local museums. Research stations transferred data to public archives. Everything was done correctly, professionally, without drama or complaint. Dr. Owen Park, a xenobiologist who ran a research facility in the Outer Reach, was one of the last to leave. He had worked with scientists from 17 different species, studying diseases that crossed biological boundaries. His team had developed cures for 3 major plagues in the past decade. When Owen announced his departure, his alien colleagues seemed genuinely shocked. "But the work," one of them said, "we cannot continue without your methods." Owen smiled sadly. "You'll figure it out. You're all brilliant scientists." What he didn't say was that humans had been sharing their methods freely for years, publishing every discovery in open databases, training anyone who asked. The other species took this for granted, assuming it was just what everyone did. They never noticed that only humans made everything freely available. They never wondered why humans spent so much time helping others succeed. Rachel's communicator buzzed. A message from the transport coordinator, final departure in 12 hours. She acknowledged the message and took one last look around the council chamber. Somewhere in the station, other humans were conducting their own quiet goodbyes. No ceremonies, no speeches, no attempts to change minds. They were simply leaving. In the docking bay, ships bearing Earth's symbol prepared for the long journey home. Merchants, diplomats, teachers, scientists, engineers, families who had built lives among the stars, all going back to human space. Some cried. Some looked relieved. Most just looked tired. Rachel found a viewing port and watched the activity below. A Chitauri merchant approached a human pilot, trying to negotiate continued service. The pilot politely declined. The merchant offered more money. The pilot explained that human commercial vessels would no longer operate in Council space. The merchant's antennae drooped in what might have been disappointment or annoyance. This scene repeated across the station. Council members suddenly realizing they had relied on human services they never officially acknowledged. The pilots who flew dangerous routes other species avoided. The medics who responded to emergencies in contested zones. The engineers who maintained equipment because they noticed it needed maintenance, not because anyone asked. Humans did these things not for profit or recognition, but because they saw something that needed doing and they did it. The Council never understood this. They thought everything operated on contracts and obligations. They never grasped that humans often acted simply because it was right. Administrator Lysara sent a final communication requesting a meeting. Rachel declined politely. There was nothing left to discuss. Earth had made its decision. The galaxy would continue without human participation. Perhaps the Council would learn something from this. Perhaps not. Either way, it was no longer humanity's concern. The transport departed at dawn, station time. Rachel watched Unity Station shrink in the viewscreen, becoming just another point of light among millions. Somewhere in that station, Counselor Bren was probably already discussing how to redistribute human trade routes. Administrator Lysara was likely preparing reports about minimal impact projections. Neither of them noticed the young Lumi's observer named Prism, who had worked closely with humans for years, now staring at the departure schedules with growing concern. Prism had learned to read human expressions, had studied their history, had come to understand their motivations. And Prism knew something the senior council members did not. Humans were not angry, they were done, and that was far more dangerous. 3 months passed like water through cracks in stone, slowly but inevitably changing the landscape of the galaxy. The Chitauri merchant vessel Prosperity drifted in the dead zone between systems, its engines cold and life support failing. Captain Vorn sent distress signals to every frequency, his mandibles clicking in distress. 2 Council patrol ships received the signals. Both continued on their scheduled routes. Interference in commercial disputes violated Protocol Section 47. The fact that living beings were dying on that ship did not change the regulations. On the 4th day, Vorn's crew ran out of oxygen. By the time a salvage team arrived a week later, they found only bodies. The report noted that human rescue services would have responded within hours. That observation appeared in the file marked Operational Challenges and was never mentioned again in official channels. Counselor Bren sat in his office reviewing trade statistics, trying to understand why Chitauri shipping losses had increased by 40%. Pirates who had been quiet for years suddenly grew bold. Routes that were safe for decades now required armed escorts. Insurance costs were destroying profit margins. Bren requested data on anti-piracy operations. The results confused him. Council security forces patrolled the same sectors they always had, maintaining standard coverage patterns. Nothing had changed in their procedures. Then he noticed a footnote in an old report. Human civilian vessels had been conducting voluntary patrols in high-risk areas, responding to distress calls, escorting merchant ships through dangerous zones. No contracts, no official authorization. They just did it because pirates were bad for everyone. Now those humans were gone, and the pirates knew it. Across the galaxy in Delphi space, Administrator Lysara faced a different crisis. The plague spreading through Colony 7 had a 90% mortality rate. Standard Council medical protocols were failing. The disease adapted faster than their treatments could account for. Lysara pulled up emergency contact procedures and found a priority channel labeled Human Medical Initiative. She activated the link. The system connected, paused, then displayed a simple message. This service has been discontinued. For medical emergencies, please contact your local council health authority. Lysara stared at the screen. The Human Medical Initiative had saved millions of lives over the years, responding to outbreaks that official channels were too slow to address. She had always assumed it was some official Earth government program. Only now did she learn it had been run by volunteers, human doctors who coordinated their own time and resources to help species they had never met. The plague on Colony 7 killed 60,000 Delphi before it burned itself out. The entire time, Lysara knew that human medics could have stopped it in days. Dr. Owen Park sat in his new laboratory on Earth, watching news feeds from the galaxy he left behind. His former colleagues sent messages daily, begging him to return, to share his research, to help them continue the work they had started together. Owen wanted to help. Every instinct he had screamed to respond, to send the data they needed, to guide them through the procedures he had spent years developing. But he remembered why he left. He remembered presenting breakthrough discoveries only to have alien scientists claim the credit. He remembered training entire research teams who later excluded him from their papers. He remembered being called enthusiastic when he was being visionary and hasty when he was being efficient. He sent polite responses explaining that his current work focused on human concerns within human space. He wished them well. He did not send the research they requested. Prism stood before a small gathering of junior council members, presenting findings that made everyone uncomfortable. The young Loomies had spent 3 months documenting every human contribution to galactic society that had no official record. The list was staggering. Humans had maintained the communications relay in the 7th sector for 12 years, preventing it from failing, never asking for compensation. They had operated a free database of scientific discoveries that 17,000 researchers used daily. They had prepositioned emergency supplies on 43 worlds that experienced regular natural disasters. They had trained pilots from 19 different species in advanced rescue techniques. They had mediated disputes between colonies, organized cultural exchanges, funded scholarships for students from poor worlds, and performed 10,000 other acts of service that no one officially acknowledged. They were the connective tissue of our society, Prism explained, their crystalline structure pulsing with emphasis. We never noticed because we never looked. We assumed these things just happened, that someone official was responsible. But it was humans, acting without obligation, without contracts, without recognition. One of the other junior members, a Chitauri named Tess, spoke quietly. My cousin died on the Prosperity. The ship that sent distress calls no one answered. Silence filled the room. Humans would have answered, Tess continued. They always answered. The gathering dispersed slowly, each member carrying the weight of understanding. They had been taught that humans were impulsive, emotional, too quick to act without proper authorization. Now they realized those qualities meant humans helped when help was needed, not when paperwork was approved. Counselor Bren received a personal message from his hive colony on the edge of council space. They needed medical supplies for a contamination event. The official supply chain would take 6 weeks. The colony had 3 weeks before the contamination became lethal. Bren remembered that human cargo ships used to pass through that sector regularly. The captains always asked if anyone needed anything, always had extra supplies, always seemed happy to help. Bren had found it inefficient. this casual charity that followed no logical business model. He tried contacting human cargo services. The few that responded politely explained they no longer operated in council space. One captain, a woman named Janet, was more direct. "You folks made it clear you didn't value what we did," she said, "so we stopped doing it. Simple as that." Bren's colony received emergency supplies eventually, but 73 individuals died waiting. Each death was recorded, analyzed, and filed. No one officially connected these deaths to humanity's absence, but Bren knew. He knew, and the weight of that knowledge changed something fundamental in his understanding of how civilization should function. Administrator Lysara compiled a report for the Council's senior leadership. She documented the increasing crises, the gaps in services, the rising costs of problems that humans had been quietly preventing. She projected that within a year, the accumulated damage would be catastrophic. The senior council members thanked her for the thorough analysis and filed it under long-term considerations. Prism watched all of this unfold and began writing a document that would change everything. Prism's document began circulating through unauthorized channels on a Tuesday, spreading through personal networks faster than any official communication ever had. The title was simple and devastating: "What We Lost When We Lost Humanity." The document did not argue or accuse. It simply listed facts with supporting evidence. For every crisis now facing the galaxy, Prism showed how humans had prevented or solved similar problems in the past. For every service now missing, the document revealed how humans had provided it freely. For every gap in the social fabric, Prism demonstrated how humans had woven connections no one else bothered to maintain. Within a week, protests erupted on Unity Station, not against the Council exactly, but demanding answers. Why had no one told them how much humans did? Why was none of it official? Why did the Council let them leave without fighting to keep them? Councillor Bren found himself defending positions he no longer believed in. During a public forum, a young Chitauri merchant asked him directly why the Council had rejected the human emergency response proposal. "It was deemed wasteful," Bren said, repeating the official reasoning. "Resources allocated without clear benefit to Council interests." "How many have died because we saved those resources?" the merchant asked. "Can you put a number to it?" Bren could not answer. That night, he began reading human philosophy texts, trying to understand how a species developed such different values. He found concepts like paying it forward and leaving things better than you found them. Ideas that suggested obligation flowed not from contracts but from shared existence. These were not new ideas. Every species had philosophers who proposed similar theories, but humans seemed to actually live by them, building an entire culture around mutual support without expecting formal reciprocation. Administrator Lysara faced her own reckoning when the Stellar Navigation Network began experiencing critical failures. The network guided ships safely through dangerous regions of space, preventing countless accidents. Humans had written much of its core code and provided regular maintenance updates at no cost. Now the code was failing, adapting poorly to new stellar phenomena, and no one knew how to fix it properly. The original human programmers had moved on to other projects in human space. Lysara sent formal requests for assistance through diplomatic channels. Earth's response was professionally polite. Human programmers were currently focused on improving systems within human territory. They wished the Council success with their technical challenges. Lysara read between the lines. The message was clear: "You're on your own now." She convened an emergency meeting of the Council's technical staff. "Can we reverse engineer the human code?" she asked. The lead programmer, a Delphi named Morton, shook his head. "Technically, yes, but humans wrote this code with a philosophy of collaboration. It's designed to be modified by multiple contributors working together. Our programmers work in isolated teams protecting intellectual property. We don't have the cultural framework to maintain what they built." "Then we need to change our framework," Lysara said quietly. The word surprised even herself. Change the framework. Restructure how the entire council operated. It seemed impossible, yet the alternative was watching their civilization slowly collapse. Meanwhile, individual species began approaching humans independently, violating council protocols about unified diplomatic fronts. A delegation of Lumi scientists traveled to Earth seeking collaboration. The Chitauri Merchant Guild sent representatives asking to resume trade relationships. The Delphi medical community practically begged for access to human research databases. Rachel Foster, now living in a small apartment in Geneva, received these delegations with tea and polite conversation. She listened to their requests, acknowledged their concerns, and explained that Earth was prioritizing internal development. She never said no explicitly. She simply made it clear that humans had their own interests now. One Lumi scientist, clearly frustrated, asked, "Don't you understand we need your help?" Rachel set down her teacup carefully. "We understood you needed help for 15 years. We gave it freely. You rejected our participation in the council while benefiting from our contributions everywhere else. Now you want us back because it's convenient for you. So this is revenge." "No," Rachel said firmly. "This is self-respect. We're not angry. We're just done being taken for granted." Dr. Owen Park found himself in a similar position. Alien scientists who once dismissed his methods now praised his brilliance. Institutions that rejected his proposals now offered him prestigious positions. Everyone suddenly recognized human expertise now that it was unavailable. Owen agreed to mentor a small group of alien scientists who came to Earth genuinely seeking to learn, not just to extract knowledge. He taught them human methods, collaboration over competition, sharing over hoarding, curiosity over caution. Some understood, some would never understand. Owen accepted both outcomes. The real crisis began with an astronomical observation. A massive stellar phenomenon, something between a solar flare and a nova, was building in the Kilos system. The energy release would be catastrophic, affecting 17 inhabited systems in an expanding sphere of radiation and gravitational distortion. The Council had 6 months to evacuate billions of people or find a way to mitigate the disaster. Previous such events had been handled by joint task forces using methods humans pioneered: rapid assessment, creative problem-solving, coordinated action across multiple species and jurisdictions. The Council's traditional approach involved committees, studies, reports, and hierarchical decision-making that took months to authorize simple actions. Lysara watched the preliminary response meetings and felt despair. They were arguing about jurisdiction while billions of lives hung in the balance. The Chitauri wanted economic impact studies. The Delphi demanded environmental assessments. The Lumis were still calibrating their instruments for better data. No one was actually doing anything. That night, Lysara made a decision that would define her legacy. She began drafting a document titled Proposed Restructuring of Galactic Governance, Learning from Failure. It was not a report for filing. It was a revolutionary proposal that would change the Council's fundamental nature. But first, she needed to do something even more difficult. She needed to admit, publicly and completely, that the Council had been wrong about humans. Councillor Bren, reading Lysara's draft proposal, came to the same conclusion. They needed to apologize not just formally, but genuinely. They needed to acknowledge what humans had given and what the Council had thrown away. Prism, watching events unfold, prepared to support the reform movement they had accidentally started. Junior Council members were already organizing, calling themselves the Reform Caucus, demanding change from within. The galaxy was waking up. The question was whether it would wake up in time. Administrator Lysara stood at the podium in the council chamber, looking out at representatives from 43 species, and prepared to do something no council leader had done in 300 years. She was going to admit they were wrong. The chamber fell silent as she began. No prepared speech, no careful political language, just truth. "We failed humanity," Lysara said simply. "We failed them repeatedly, systematically, and arrogantly. We dismissed their contributions while benefiting from their generosity. We rejected their counsel while accepting their help. We treated them as children while they acted with more wisdom than we possessed." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Councillor Bren sat motionless, his compound eyes fixed on Lysara. Half the council looked shocked. The other half looked angry. Lysara continued, "The crisis facing the Kilos system will kill billions. We cannot solve it using traditional council methods. We lack the coordination, the rapid response capability, and the innovative thinking that humans brought to every challenge. We need them. But more importantly, we need to become the kind of civilization that deserves their cooperation." Senior Counselor Thrain, a massive being whose species had founded the original council, stood heavily. "You propose we beg." "I propose we learn," Lysara replied. "Humans didn't leave because we were cruel. They left because we were complacent. We can change that, but only if we're willing to examine why they succeeded where we failed." The chamber erupted into argument. Conservative members called for Lysara's removal. Reformers demanded immediate action. Junior members, led by Prism, began chanting for structural change. The vote happened 3 hours later. By a narrow margin, the council authorized Lysara to draft a formal apology and reform proposal. Half of the senior leadership resigned in protest. New elections were called. The galaxy watched as the council began tearing itself apart, restructuring in real time. Councillor Bren, who voted with the reformers, faced backlash from his own people. Traditional Chitauri values emphasized hierarchy and protocol. Bren's support for reform violated centuries of cultural practice. His hive mother summoned him home. Bren expected punishment, perhaps exile. Instead, she shared something unexpected: historical records from before the Chitauri joined the council, when their species faced extinction from a plague. Another species had helped them survive, asking nothing in return, teaching them techniques that saved millions. "We forgot," his hive mother said, her antennae drooping with age and sadness. "We survived because someone helped when they didn't have to. Then we joined the council and learned to think in contracts and obligations. We forgot the gift that saved us." Bren understood. The Chitauri had once been like humans, offering help freely. The council had taught them to abandon that approach as inefficient. "What if the council is wrong about efficiency?" Bren asked. His hive mother made a sound that might have been laughter. "Then we've wasted 300 years being efficiently cruel." Back on Earth, Rachel watched the council's broadcast with a mix of emotions. Lysara's speech was genuine, that much was clear, but words were easy. Actions mattered. Still, something in the apology touched her. Lysara didn't make excuses or minimize the harm. She simply acknowledged truth and accepted responsibility. Rachel's communicator showed thousands of messages from alien contacts, all asking the same basic question: would Earth help with the Kilos crisis? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she called a meeting of former ambassadors and technical experts. They gathered in a conference room in Brussels, facing a decision that would affect billions. Dr. Owen Park spoke first. "They're going to fail without our help. Millions will die, maybe billions." "We know," Rachel said. "The question is whether we help because they need us or help because it's right." "Isn't that the same thing?" someone asked. "No," Rachel replied. "If we help because they need us, we're trading on their desperation. If we help because it's right, we're being who we've always been." The room fell silent. Finally, a former trade negotiator named Robert spoke. We left because they took us for granted. If we come running back the first time they ask, we prove them right. We're just the helper species who can't say no. But if we let people die to make a point, Owen countered, we become as cold as they were. Rachel considered both arguments. What if we help but we don't rejoin? We assist with the crisis as ourselves, not as council members. We show them what cooperation looks like without obligation. The proposal spread through human networks. A global referendum was called, not about rejoining the council, but about how Earth should respond to the crisis. The debate was fierce, passionate, and deeply human. In the end, humanity voted to help, not because the council asked, but because lives mattered more than pride. The first Earth vessels arrived in Kilo's space carrying scientific equipment and disaster relief supplies. They did not wait for council authorization. They began working immediately, coordinating with local authorities, sharing data freely, doing what humans always did, seeing a problem and fixing it. Lysara received the news with tears. The gesture was more powerful than any formal agreement. Humans were helping even though they had every reason not to. Prism organized teams of young council members to work alongside the human experts. This generation, at least, understood what the elder members had missed. They watched humans work and learned that efficiency wasn't just about protocols. True efficiency came from people who cared enough to find solutions instead of following procedures. Counselor Bren traveled to Kilos personally, working in the coordination center where human and alien teams planned evacuation routes and mitigation strategies. He worked directly with a human engineer named Lisa, who taught him rapid problem-solving techniques. "You don't think about what you can't do," Bren observed. "You only think about what you can try." Lisa shrugged. "Impossible just means nobody's solved it yet, so you solve it." This philosophy, so simple yet so radical, began spreading through the teams. Instead of listing obstacles, they brainstormed solutions. Instead of waiting for authorization, they took action and reported results. Instead of protecting jurisdictions, they shared information. The crisis response became a laboratory for a new way of operating, one that looked suspiciously like how humans had always operated. Rachel arrived at Kilos 3 weeks into the crisis, not as an ambassador but as a civilian observer. Lysara met her personally, and the two women walked through the coordination center watching hundreds of beings from dozens of species working together seamlessly. "This is what it could have been," Lysara said quietly. "This is what you tried to show us." Rachel nodded. "The question is whether you can maintain it after the crisis ends. Anyone can cooperate when disaster forces them to. The real test is cooperation when it's just the right thing to do." "We want to try," Lysara said. "Will you help us learn?" Rachel looked at the coordination center, at humans and aliens working side by side, and made a decision that would reshape the galaxy. The referendum results came through at midnight, Earth Standard Time. Rachel sat in her apartment watching the numbers scroll across her screen, continent by continent, vote by vote. The question had been simple: should humanity engage with the galactic community again? The answer was yes, but with conditions. Humanity would not rejoin the old council. They would help build something new, something better, or they would remain separate. The galaxy could change with them or continue without them. No compromise on this point. Rachel drafted the response carefully. Earth would send a delegation to discuss terms for a new kind of galactic cooperation. Not membership in the existing council, but partnership in creating something that had never existed before. A truly cooperative commonwealth based on shared values rather than hierarchical control. The message went out at dawn. By noon, Lysara had accepted the terms unconditionally. The Kilos crisis continued for another 2 months. The stellar phenomenon couldn't be stopped, but it could be managed. Human engineers worked with Chitauri mathematicians to calculate precise evacuation windows. Delphi biologists partnered with human medics to protect vulnerable populations. Lumi's observers documented everything, learning human methods in real time. Dr. Owen Park led a team developing radiation shields using a combination of human materials science and alien energy manipulation. The breakthrough came at 3 in the morning, when a young Chitauri physicist named Tess suggested combining two approaches everyone thought were incompatible. "Why not?" Tess asked when senior scientists questioned the idea. "We won't know until we try." Owen recognized the echo of human philosophy in those words. Tess had learned more than techniques. She had learned how to think like someone who believed problems were meant to be solved, not just studied. The shields worked, not perfectly, but well enough to protect the evacuation ships and the most vulnerable colonies. Billions were saved through coordination that would have been impossible under the old council system. Counselor Bren found himself leading refugee assistance, organizing shelter and supplies for displaced populations. He worked 18-hour days alongside human volunteers, learning their methods for large-scale logistics. The humans never followed proper bureaucratic channels. They just identified needs and filled them, trusting that authorization would follow success. It did. Even conservative council members couldn't argue with results. Prism's Reform Caucus grew into a legitimate political movement. Young members from every species joined, united by the belief that the old ways had failed. They wanted the galaxy to work like the Kilo's response teams, cooperative, innovative, focused on results rather than protocol. The senior council members who hadn't resigned watched their authority eroding in real time. Some fought against the change. Others, like Lysara, embraced it. 3 months after humanity's conditional acceptance, Rachel returned to Unity Station. The place looked different now. The Grand Council chambers were being renovated, rebuilt into a circular forum where no seat would be elevated above another. The hierarchical tiers that had defined galactic governance for 3 centuries were coming down. Lysara greeted Rachel personally. The Delphi administrator looked exhausted but determined. "We're calling it the Galactic Commonwealth. Not a council of elders directing younger species, but a commonwealth of equals working together." "Pretty words," Rachel said. "Can you make them real?" "We're trying. The charter is based on principles your delegation suggested: transparency, accountability, genuine representation. We've established the emergency response service you proposed 3 years ago. Humans are training the first response teams." Rachel walked through the station, seeing changes everywhere. Human and alien businesses operating side by side. Mixed species working groups discussing everything from trade routes to cultural exchanges. Children from a dozen worlds playing together in the public gardens. She also saw problems. Old prejudices hadn't disappeared. Some species still resented humans. Others resented the changes humans inspired. Unity wasn't universal, but it was growing. At the Commonwealth's first official session, Rachel took her seat in the circular forum. Not as Earth's ambassador to the Council, but as Earth's representative to something new. Around her sat beings who had learned, slowly and painfully, that cooperation worked better than control. The session began with a memorial for those lost during the year of crisis. Human and alien names read aloud, each one representing someone who died because the old system failed. The memorial took 2 hours. Everyone stayed for every name. Then Prism stood to present the Commonwealth Charter. The young Lumis had grown into a leader, speaking with confidence about creating systems that served people rather than requiring people to serve systems. "We failed because we valued order over compassion," Prism said. "We maintained protocols that prevented help instead of enabling it. We created a civilization that was efficient at maintaining itself but terrible at supporting its citizens. Humans showed us another way. Now we must prove we can learn." The charter passed with overwhelming support. For the first time in galactic history, every member species had equal voting power. Decisions required consensus, not just majority rule. The largest military powers had the same voice as the smallest trading posts. It was messy and complicated, and would require constant work to maintain. It was also more just than anything that had come before. Counselor Bren, now calling himself Representative Bren, approached Rachel after the session. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Personal, not just political. I dismissed you repeatedly. I was wrong and I'm sorry." Rachel studied him, seeing genuine regret in his posture and tone. "I appreciate that. What changed?" "I stopped thinking about what was proper and started thinking about what was right. Turns out those aren't always the same thing." Rachel smiled. "That's the most human thing I've heard you say." Over the following weeks, Rachel watched the Commonwealth take shape. The Emergency Response Service deployed to its first crisis, a mining accident on a remote asteroid. The response was immediate, coordinated, and effective. Lives were saved that would have been lost under the old system. Human scientific databases reopened to Commonwealth members, but now other species contributed their own research freely. The one-way flow of information became a genuine exchange. Dr. Owen Park returned to the research facility he had abandoned, but this time as director of the Commonwealth Institute of Cooperative Science. His first class included students from 19 species, all learning human methods of collaborative research. Not everyone approved. Some humans felt Earth was being too forgiving. Some aliens resented human influence over the new system. The Commonwealth faced opposition from multiple directions, external and internal. But it was working. Slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely working, and that was enough to build on. 1 year after humanity's conditional return, Rachel stood in the observation deck of the redesigned Unity Station, watching a graduation ceremony that would have been impossible under the old council. 200 beings from 37 species stood in neat rows, wearing the silver and blue uniform of the Commonwealth Emergency Response Service. They had trained together for 6 months, learning not just technical skills but the philosophy behind them. Help first, ask permission later, cooperate across boundaries, see problems as challenges, not impossibilities. The valedictorian was a Chitauri named Tess, the same young merchant who had questioned Counselor Bren a year ago about the cost of saved resources. She spoke about her cousin who died on the Prosperity, about preventable tragedies, about choosing to be the kind of person who answers distress calls. "We cannot change the past," Tess said, "but we can honor those we lost by becoming who they needed us to be. Today, we become responders. Tomorrow, we become the answer to someone's desperate prayer for help." The graduates deployed that same day. Within hours, they were responding to a reactor failure on a space station in the outer reach. The crisis was contained in 4 hours, 0 casualties. The old council would have still been forming committees to study the problem. Dr. Owen Park sat in his office at the Commonwealth Institute, reading research proposals from his students. They were learning to think differently, to see science as collaboration rather than competition. One proposal suggested combining human genetic techniques with Delphi bioengineering and Lumi's data modeling to cure a disease that affected all 3 species. The student team consisted of members from all 3 species working together, sharing credit equally. 5 years ago, that would have been unthinkable. Each species would have worked separately, protected their discoveries, competed for recognition. Owen approved the proposal and forwarded it to the Commonwealth Research Fund. He added a note, "This is what it looks like when we get it right." Representative Bren faced a different challenge. His home colony wanted to withdraw from the Commonwealth, claiming the new system gave too much power to smaller species. The traditional Chitauri hierarchy didn't translate well to equal representation. Bren returned home to argue for staying. He spoke to packed assembly halls explaining what the Commonwealth really meant. "We're not losing power," he told them. "We're gaining partners. The old way made us strong alone. The new way makes us stronger together." The debates were fierce. Bren's own hive mother spoke against him publicly, defending traditional values. But younger Chitauri, the ones who had worked in the Kilo's crisis response, supported the change. They had seen cooperation work. They didn't want to go back to isolation. The colony voted to remain in the Commonwealth by a narrow margin. Bren knew this fight would continue, that changing centuries of culture wouldn't happen in a single year. But the direction was right, and that mattered. Prism led the Commonwealth Youth Initiative, a program connecting young beings from different worlds. They didn't just share culture or trade. They worked on projects together, learning early that cooperation produced better results than competition. The initiative's first major project was a memorial garden on Unity Station, honoring those lost during the crisis year. Students from 40 species designed it together, incorporating elements from every culture. The garden became a physical reminder of why the Commonwealth existed, because everyone mattered and no one should be left to suffer alone. Administrator Lysara, now called Coordinator Lysara, spent her days managing the messy reality of consensus governance. It was frustrating, slow, and far less efficient than the old top-down system. It was also more just, more inclusive, and more resilient. She wrote a book about the transition, titled The Cost of Arrogance, How We Almost Lost Everything. The book became required reading in Commonwealth governance courses. Lysara didn't pull punches. She documented every failure, every missed opportunity, every time pride prevented progress. Some called it self-flagellation. Lysara called it honesty. "We can't prevent future mistakes," she wrote in the conclusion, "but we can learn from past ones. That's the difference between wisdom and stubbornness." Rachel received a message from a colony she had helped decades ago, back when she was just a young diplomat trying to make a difference. They had named their new capital city Foster's Hope. The message included an invitation to the dedication ceremony. Rachel attended with a small delegation. The city was beautiful, a blend of human and alien architecture that worked together instead of competing for dominance. The mayor, an elderly being whose species Rachel had helped negotiate a trade dispute, spoke about the human who taught them that problems were meant to be solved, not just managed. "Ambassador Foster showed us that caring wasn't weakness," the mayor said. "She taught us that the strongest civilizations are built on compassion, not conquest. This city stands as proof that she was right." Rachel gave a brief speech about communities supporting each other, about building bridges instead of walls. She didn't mention the council's old failures or humanity's vindication. The past was past. The future was what they made of it. Flying back to Unity Station, Rachel reflected on the year of change. The Commonwealth wasn't perfect. Disputes still arose. Species still disagreed. Resources were still scarce, and not every problem had a solution. But when distress calls went out, someone answered. When disasters struck, responders deployed. When species needed help, the Commonwealth provided it, not because of contracts or obligations, but because it was right. The old council had asked what benefit came from helping others. The Commonwealth asked what kind of civilization they wanted to be. That single change in question made all the difference. Rachel's final official act as Earth's representative was to propose the creation of the Institute of Cooperative Studies, a research facility dedicated to studying and teaching collaboration across species boundaries. The proposal passed unanimously. She recommended Dr. Owen Park as the first director. He accepted on one condition: the institute would be located on a neutral station accessible to everyone, not on Earth or any council world. The Commonwealth agreed. That evening, Rachel stood in the same observation deck where she had packed her belongings a year ago, preparing to leave forever. Now she was staying, watching ships from 100 worlds docking at Unity Station, watching beings from countless species working together. Representative Bren joined her, his mandibles moving in what she had learned to recognize as contentment. "Do you think it will last?" he asked. Rachel considered the question honestly. "I think we'll have to fight to maintain it. Every day, every decision, every crisis. Nothing this good comes easy or stays without effort. But it's worth the fight." Rachel watched a human child playing with Chitauri and Delphi youngsters in the garden below, all of them laughing in different languages that somehow communicated joy perfectly. "Yes," she said, "it's worth the fight." The Commonwealth wasn't humanity's gift to the galaxy. It was what happened when beings from different worlds decided to build something together, learning from each other's strengths instead of exploiting each other's weaknesses. The galaxy hadn't shook because humans left. It shook because it finally woke up to what civilization could be when compassion mattered more than control. And now, together, they were building something worth believing in.